Hi everyone, I'm Bert Kavanaugh, and today I'm going to be teaching you a little bit more about Spanish culture. So listen up, because at the end of this video, I'm going to have you fill out a short survey about how I did, to gather information for my personal project report. Thank you! So a little overview of what's going to be in this video. First, I'm going to teach you all about a traditional Spanish dance. Then, I'm going to explain why a negative stereotype of the Spanish culture is wrong, using the traditional dance as an example. Finally, I'm going to explain why that stereotype is attached to the Spanish culture in the first place. And thank you in advance for being quiet and paying attention. So let's start at the beginning, or what most people think is the beginning anyway. The truth is, the origins of the flamenco are very mysterious, and historians can't say with 100% accuracy when the flamenco was started, or by who. The origins of the flamenco seem to come mostly from either Gypsy and Roma traditions, or mostly from Spanish Moor traditions. But the flamenco was created when these different cultures and traditions mixed. The form of the flamenco dance today was created in the 18th century, and most historians agree on this. But there is a chance different, earlier forms were created between the 9th and 14th centuries. The one thing that historians are sure of is that the flamenco started in the Andalusia, or the Andalusian region of southern Spain. When was the flamenco popular? The flamenco started to be popular in the early 19th century in response to the French invasion of Spain. To oppose French influence, everything Spanish was really popular at this time, including the flamenco. And the flamenco's popularity only grew from there, resulting in the Golden Age, from 1869 to 1910. Love of the flamenco is a constant in Spanish history since the 19th century, with no real surges since the Golden Age. There were only 2 times in the history of the flamenco where there was any real pushback. Once was with the generation of 1898. The idealists in this generation wanted to distance themselves from Spanish traditions to try to end Spain's downward spiral at the time. But flamenco was still very popular with the general public. The other instance of pushback was Purism. In the 1920s, a group of purists claimed that the cante jondo was the most artistic version of the flamenco and was the only version that should be danced. But the Purism movement didn't even last to the end of the decade and failed greatly. Flamenco was barely ever considered controversial, but as I just explained, there were some awkward moments. Strangely, after the high culture in Spain distanced itself from the flamenco with the Generation 98, it was a cante jondo competition held in 1922 as part of the Purism movement that showed new interest in flamenco among the high culture. And the acceptance of different forms of flamenco and the end of the Purism movement came with the generation of 1927. Many members of this generation were from Andalusia, Spain, and were more familiar with the true depth of the art form. The generation of 27 understood that the pureness the Purism movement was searching for never existed with the flamenco, and promoted all different forms of the dance and different ways to express yourself through the art form of the flamenco. I know this is weird, but take a second to look at the contrast of these 2 dancers in the picture. This contrast is what the flamenco is about. What about the flamenco today? Well, as new forms of music became popular, flamenco artists combined flamenco and the different forms of music, even pop and rock music. One of the more famous examples of this is the Omega album that was released in 1996. This is a flamenco rock album, and the album cover is the picture on the right. Flamenco has continued to be a way for people to express themselves in different ways. So, Spaniards are lazy. But how does the stereotype look next to the flamenco? Not so good. Lazy often means not doing something, or if you do something, you put little effort into it. This is not at all the case with the flamenco. This dance involves intricate arm movements, hand claps, and footwork. The flamenco requires a lot of effort, and it's generally very difficult to do. Also, if something is done lazily, it's just plain or boring. This is also not the case with the flamenco. There are a variety of different types of flamenco, each as unique and interesting as the last. Also, quite often, the flamenco means something to the person performing it, so they take time and effort to share that thing with the audience. So, why are people from Spain considered lazy? In my research, the only reason I could find was because of the midday siesta. After lunch, people would take a nap instead of going straight back to work. This results in an extra long lunch hour that typically starts around 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Anyone who thinks of the midday siesta and thinks lazy obviously doesn't know why it started in the first place. The midday siesta started because in hot climates like Spain and other Spanish-speaking countries, it was unsafe to work around lunchtime because it was the hottest part of the day. So workers would take a long lunch break to avoid the heat. This also allowed workers to be more productive in the afternoon because they were not as tired. Now, the extra long lunch break is not always used for napping, but also to spend time with family or just relax before the afternoon shift. Now, this is just a quick note, but the flamenco is not just a type of dance. It is a unique art form. Just like with other art forms, there are different ways to flamenco. For example, music. In music, there's band and choir, pop and rock, and many other different types. In flamenco, there's flamenco music and the dance. There's cantejando and the palos. For the purposes of this video, I way oversimplified what flamenco is, and I highly recommend you learn more about it because it is super interesting. Here is a video of the flamenco being performed. Enjoy!